Hello everybody, and welcome to the first and only generative AI talk that we have at reInvent, right? So let me start with a number. 92% is the amount of 500 Fortune companies that are already using generative AI to change how they work and speak to their customers. This is a quote from OpenAI ex or current CEO, Sam Altman, that said that 92% of the companies are already using OpenAI to adopt generative AI. What we will see in the next 20 minutes is how an integrated data platform can accelerate by removing obstacles your journey to generative AI. So first of all, who am I and why am I talking to you? I'm Francesco Tisiot. I'm a staff developer advocate at a company called Aiven. But more than that, I'm a data aficionado, which means that I love solving data problems with technology. And as you may have guessed, I'm also Italian, which means that I'm really, really lazy. So you can imagine how much I was amazed when they told me that instead of me solving problems, there was a tool out there that could solve all the problems for me. Crazy, right? That tool is generative AI. And generative AI is already solving a lot of problems for a lot of people. I mean, my kids are using generative AI to solve homework. You can rate it if it's good or not. I'm using generative AI to make my content better. I'm a public speaker, I'm a writer, I'm not a native English speaker or writer. I use generative AI to help me make my content more readable, more understandable. And please let me know if it works at the end of the session. But then other people are using generative AI to have the most common solution to a certain problem, or to start with a business problem and end up with working code. So it seems like generative AI is perfect. But is it true? Well, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's pretty good as long as we ask data that is in the public domain. Because generative AI learns from the public domain what is the most correct answer for some sort of definition of correctness to the most compelling words, to the most common questions. It learns how we speak and how we interact and what is the tone that we use in our interaction. However, when we need to adapt Gen AI in our business, we need to do one step more. We cannot rely on public data alone. We need to start fitting with private data. And here is the big problem. I want to ask you a question. How many of you have all your data asset in just one very well-designed, unique data solution? I believe, apart from my colleague, none of the other hands were raised. Because most of the time, if you're lucky and your data is well organized, you are in a situation like the one in the image, where you have a huge amount of data assets scattered across a very different set of tools that are solving a specific function in your company. You will have a tool for analyzing the click stream of your website, another tool to store the information about your users, and stuff like this. Our work as humans is to understand where the good parts of the information are and start collecting them and unifying them from all our various data assets. But then here it comes the other problem. And the other problem is what we are feeding generative AI with. Because in my opinion, AI is just a very good, but very good parrot. So it will repeat whatever we provide to them. The problem with private data is that we could have commercially valuable data, we could have sensitive data, we could have regulated data within our data assets. So if we just open the Pandora box of our data assets and we shovel everything to generative AI, we are now at risk of exposing data that we shouldn't expose. But even more, we are at risk of creating something that is useless because we include the good part of our data assets in a huge amount of garbage data that we have in our company. But that's only a technical limit. The accuracy is only a technical limit. If we just take whatever we have in-house and we provide that to AI, we are at risk of exposing personal information. We are at risk of exposing regulated data. And the reality is that, you don't want to put your company at risk. Or maybe if you have information about European customer, do something like, for example, Meta that received 1.2 billion euros fine for not being GDPR compliant. And this could happen if you don't think carefully about what you are feeding AI with. So after I've been probably scaring you about generative AI, let's try to understand what we need to make it work. The first thing is, everything is based on data. We need data to make AI work. And we probably have already tools in our technological tool belt that are containing the data that we need. Wouldn't it be cool if the same tools that we use for our day-to-day operation could also speak the language that generative AI is speaking? I mean, it would be cool because we could mix the queries that we usually do on the operational side with some sort of vector search that is behind generative AI or any AI. Because the language that generative AI speaks is not the images, is not the text, is not the voice. Every time you give an input to generative AI or every time you receive an output, AI will transform that input or output in numbers, because all computers can do is talk numbers. So they will use what are called embeddings, long vector representation of these numbers, which translate whatever input or output in kind of a series of numbers themselves. And then they will try to find which other similar vectors are around, and that will be the next suggestion, the next iteration of generative AI. If we could have tools in our tool belts that can do both the operational part, but also the embeddings part, we could, for example, in the case of a chatbot, not only suggest to a customer what is the most relevant resources based on their question, but we could also query, for example, the recent pattern of steps that the customer has been doing in order to give a solution that is relevant not only for the question per se, but also relevant to the previous steps in our platform. So mixing vector search with the standard queries that we use in day-to-day operation. But solving the problem on a single tool is not enough. We have various tools, we have various data assets. So what we need is we need to harvest the data from the various places and bring them together. Not only bring them together, also reshape it, because we need, for example, to exclude PII data in order not to expose those data outside. And I want to make a point here. I believe the harvesting should be done in real time. Because if you are approaching generative AI, you're probably willing to customize the experience for your users. And if you spend time and energy and money into building something that knows your product, that talks like you talk to your customers, what you don't want to end up with is that that tool provides, for example, a suggestion about a feature of your product that either is not available or not, it was like this 2 weeks ago. So the real-time component allows us to provide to generative AI the context about what the users has been trying to do recently. Not 2 days ago, not 5 days ago, now. So after we harvest the data, after we have all the data tools that can talk embeddings, it's time to start interacting with generative AI. And we have two options if we use a pre-trained model. We can either do fine-tuning or prompt assembly. With fine-tuning, basically we'll teach to Gen AI about our business in general. So we upload, for example, in a specific folder, all our technical documentation and all our interactions with our customers, and Gen AI will be able to understand how we speak and what our product is about. But then the interesting bit for me comes with prompt assembly. Because with prompt assembly, in the case of a chatbot, we are within an interaction with a specific customer. So we can give information about who, where, what, now. So if, for example, a customer comes to us and says, how does product A work? Instead of just giving a list of the details of product A, if we are able to inject the fact that the same customer tried to use feature X 2 minutes ago and maybe receiving error Y, we can give a much better customized reply. So by adding a lot of recent context, near real-time context, we are able to give a lot more information. So after a lot of this theory, let's try to understand how we connect all the pieces. Let's start from the end. The end is the end user. And probably generative AI will be the first interaction from the user to our company. What is on the completely opposite side? On the completely opposite side, we will have our data sets, which could be operational databases, NoSQL stores, could be search databases, could be a variety of different data tools. What do we need now in the middle? We need something that can harvest and unify all these data assets. And then need to be in near real time or real time. So we probably need a streaming data pipeline that can talk with all our tools and maybe also a little bit more. But then if we just collect this information, we are at risk of exposing something that we shouldn't. So what we need to have on top is some sort of computational engine that allows us to reshape the data, to remove PII fields, to aggregate the data to not analyze the single event, but a list of events, one after the other. And then after we are connecting our computational engine with the streaming data pipeline, we need to close the gap. So we need either to upload the data for fine-tuning the model, or we need to inject via REST API, for example, context with prompt assembly. So after I've been talking for 30 minutes, this seems straightforward, right? One day of work, everything is done. It's a little bit more complex than that, because it requires a lot of data steps, and it requires a lot of integrations. And that is usually the problem. What if I could tell you that you could pretty much solve all the data-related needs and just focus on defining what you want to expose and how you want to expose? You can do that with Aiven, the company that I work for. We are the trusted open source data platform for everyone. What we provide is the best of the open source tools in a really well integrated data platform. So, what open source tools? Do you have a data need? We cover that. We have everything that you need. We go from operational databases like MySQL and Postgres. By the way, Postgres can speak the embeddings language that generative AI is speaking. The same for OpenSearch on the search phase. If you need to analyze massive amount of data, we have ClickHouse. And then we have tools like Kafka and Flink that can connect various pieces of information together in near real time. And Flink can allow us to transform that. So if we go back to our design, we can see that Aiven fits a lot of the places, fits almost all the places. But again, solving point solution is not enough now. So giving you an operational database is not enough. What you want is something that is well integrated. What we did at Aiven is to provide the best-in-class integration. They are coming from the best-in-class open source tools like Kafka Connect, for example, but also we managed to create a lot of work to simplify how you can define connection and how you can create connection that scale as much as you need. So we created connection, integrations between the services, and not only within services within Aiven, also if, for example, you need a Lambda function to react to every Kafka message, we got you covered. There are pre-built integrations that can make this integration doable, easy to perform, and scalable, and trusted. The trusted bit is very important, and it's not only me telling you that. We have a ton of customers using Aiven since several years for their production workload. Some of these customers, they cannot work if Aiven doesn't work. and they always work well. So I believe we are doing quite a good job in keeping everything up and running. I want now to focus on 3 customers that are already using Aiven for their AI journey. The first one is Aleph Educational. Aleph Educational is helping 120,000 students and their teachers. Is using Aiven and AI to understand where the students, to help the teacher understand where the students are struggling and create customized content for the students to have a better learning experience. Label is using a variety of tools within Aiven, including OpenSearch, and is doing kind of the good thing that I was saying before. It's mixing text search with vector similarity search to allow their customer to automate the ticketing system. And when they automate their ticketing system, they can resolve tickets by providing not only content that is similar word by word, but is coherent and is interesting by the context with the vector search. Finally, Sway.ai is what I would call an AI middle player, because Sway.ai is using Aiven and AI in order to help their clients to build better and easier AI models. So for them, Aiven is not only the trusted open source data platform for everyone. For them, Aiven is the integrated AI backbone, is what takes the data from where it is to where it's needed. So if you want to know more, if you want to speak more about this, check everybody that has a crab jacket or a crab t-shirt like mine. We are at the booth 1629 at the very end of the corridor behind you. And now I want to close with the same number that I started with. 92% of the companies are already using, of the 500 Fortune companies, are already using generative AI to change how they work and they speak to clients. If you want to start your generative AI journey, I don't think you need to spend time into setting up a database or trying to understand how to integrate a streaming data platform with a database at scale. You can get that with a trusted, scalable, open source data platform like Aiven. If now you scan this QR code, you will be able to start our trial, where you will have $300 and 1 month to try all the services that we offer. And I'm now happy to answer all your questions. Thank you very much.